I'd like to talk to you about goodness. Goodness is a fruit of the Spirit. The Holy Spirit can help us to produce goodness or be good. So to be good is to do the right thing. For example, if you're hanging out with your friends and you're having a good time, but there's somebody on their own and maybe they're lonely, a bit upset, what would be the right thing to do? Would the right thing be to just carry on and do your own thing? Or would it be to help that person, maybe ask them how they are, maybe include them in what you're doing? Well, of course, that would be the right thing to do. That would be being good and showing goodness. So today our story is called Good Queen Esther. It comes from the Old Testament in the Bible, and it took place hundreds of years before Jesus was even born. Jesus was born into a Jewish family. The Jews were God's chosen people, and Esther too was born into a Jewish family hundreds of years before Jesus. Now she, sadly, her parents died, and so she was brought up by her cousin, her older cousin Mordecai, and his family. Now Esther and Mordecai and a whole group of Jewish people lived not in their own country but in a country called Persia. They had been brought there many years beforehand. Their ancestors had been brought there, and there were other groups of people that lived in Persia too. So the king of Persia was King Xerxes, and he saw the beauty of Esther and he wanted to marry her. So he did, and she became the queen, Good Queen Esther. Now, Esther had been told by Mordecai not to say that she was Jewish because they weren't really sure what King Xerxes would think about that. As it turned out, everything was fine, but they weren't sure. And so Queen Esther didn't tell King Xerxes. And every day Mordecai came to the palace gate just to look out for Esther, just to see if she was okay. And then one day he overheard two people plotting to kill the king. Mordecai was shocked, and so he went to Esther and he said that there are two people who are plotting to kill the king. You must tell the king. And so Esther did. She told the king that these two people had been plotting to kill him, and Mordecai was the person who had found out. Well, the king was glad to be told, and he got rid of those bad people, and he was very grateful to Mordecai for telling him the news. Now, in King Xerxes' palace, there was a person called Haman, and he was the chief minister, like the prime minister that we have today. And Haman thought he was so special and so much better than anybody else, and he wanted everybody to bow to him. And so he asked the king to pass a law that people should bow to him. The king didn't see anything wrong with this, and so he passed the law. But whenever Haman went past Mordecai, who was standing at the gate of the palace, Mordecai refused to bow to Haman. I guess Haman wasn't really that important in Mordecai's eyes. Why should he bow to him? Haman, however, was very annoyed by this, and he went to the king, and he told the king lots of lies, really, about the Jewish people. He said that the Jewish people were disrespectful, that they kept to themselves, that they didn't obey the laws of the king. And so the king agreed with Haman that Haman should do with the Jewish people as he wished. And so Haman plotted to kill the Jewish people. Now, when Mordecai heard about this, he was so sad, and he came to the palace gate. And there he told one of Esther's servants all about the plan to kill the Jewish people, and he asked the servant to tell Esther everything that he had said. And the servant went to Esther, and the servant told Esther all about the plan of Haman to kill the Jewish people, and that Mordecai had asked her if she could go to the king and tell the king all about this plot so that she and all the Jewish people would not be killed. Now, Esther had a little bit of a dilemma, because to do the right thing would be to go to the king and tell him that this plot of Haman's was to kill the Jewish people. But that meant that Esther would have to be telling the king that she was Jewish, and he didn't actually know. The other thing was that at the time and in that country, it was the law that if you went to the king without being summoned, then you could be punished by death, because the king had to call you. You couldn't just go and see the king, even if you were the queen. And so Esther had to make a decision. And of course, she did the right thing. She went to the king, and the king was pleased to see her, and he didn't punish her with death. He asked her what it was that she wanted. She didn't tell him straight away. She asked if she could have a banquet, and if Haman could come to that banquet. So the king agreed. Haman came to the banquet. I wonder what Haman thought was going to happen. And at the banquet, King Xerxes said to Esther, "What is it that you wanted to tell me?" And so she said, "There is someone who is plotting to kill me and my people." The king was very surprised and very cross by this. He said, "Who is this person who is plotting to kill all your people?" And she said, "It's Haman." And so the king had Haman put to death for telling such lies and for making such a plot against the Jewish people. King Xerxes gave all of Haman's land to Esther. And Esther asked Mordecai if he would look after the land and be in charge of it. So Esther did the right thing. She took a risk. She risked her own life, and she went to the king and she saved her people. So, how can you show goodness today? How can you do the right thing and let the Holy Spirit guide you in producing that goodness?